It's Dr. Lori. I'm at the Orange Tree Antique Mall in Winter Park, Florida, near Orlando, checking out some CorningWare. Come thrift with me. You always see the stuff from the 1960s, the cornflower blue all the time, but basically this is the 80s, and the 80s had a real change in CorningWare. They really branched out into different designs that would match kitchens and that would match what was interior design at the time. What was big country was big. So baskets and flowers and these pieces like this that have that sampler kind of look, sort of that embroidery needlepoint kind of look on it from the 1980s. Also notice the colors. The colors are more beige. They're not the true white for some of them. So this is one of the more popular patterns of that time period of the 1980s looking back. And this is $17, $17.75, so let's call it $18 from the mid-1980s with the lid. And there's the mark. You can see the CorningWare. I think this should be cleaned. To me, I think you should clean that off. You can do that, not difficult. So before you put it out for that, I would say clean it. Because you're cleaning the whole rest of it, you might as well clean, you're cleaning the inside, you might as well clean that place where the mark is, because people like to see the marks. I like to see the marks. The color is a little different from what we typically see, but they're branching out, although they're using these sort of very customarily country kinds of pieces. So here's the lid. And notice the lips. The lips are very popular in the 1980s with CorningWare, not only on the interior, but also on the lids. So look for that lip. This piece they want $17.75 for, so they want just about $18. And there it is from the mid-80s. I would say value on this is $20. So you're getting a deal at about $5 here. Similar patterns that relate to the 1980s is, of course, this basket pattern. So this one with the blue flowers. So it's kind of a variation on their cornflower blue, but in fact, it is a little bit more colorful. So you're seeing a little bit better colors. What's interesting in the 80s too is this reintroduction of Asian designs and Asian forms. Here you go. So you've got those abstracted irises, very typical of the 80s. It looks back to artists like Vincent van Gogh and his iris studies, which look at Japanese art. So also notice it's not sort of a bunch right in the middle, it's all off. Basically it's three elements, 1, 2, 3, and they are not right in the center. So they start to get a little more artsy, a little more artful in the 80s with the designs. So that's one of the other telltale signs. They stick to flowers. They stick to things that would look good in a particular kitchen. The abundance pattern, this pattern, is also another one that stays with respect to fruit, but basically isn't overwhelming and introduces this newer beige body. It's not the bright white body of most CorningWare in the 1980s. Now, these, in terms of price, if you like this style is out there, you can find it. But this style, to have a set of 3 like this, they want $30 just for the 2.5 liter casserole with the amber lid. So the lid now is this brown, so they're matching it. They're not putting beige with white or beige with clear lids. They're putting, of course, the amber, the brown colored lid here. I don't think it's really amber. I think it's more of a smoky color. I think that word is incorrect when you call it an amber lid. But people get upset when they go, oh no, it's the amber lid because everybody else has mistakenly called it an amber lid. It's not amber, people. Amber has an orange to it. That's a smoky brown. Anyway, having said that, 1980s, they want $30 for the big one. The big one's worth $50. This one is worth $35, and this one is worth $25. So if you can get a good deal on all 3 of them, buy all 3 of them if you like the pattern, if you collect the pattern. One of the patterns I really like, which comes out of the tradition of what's called the French white, is this. So this is the Callaway pattern, and it's ivy, and it really does look back to traditional French bakeware. So this is ivy, and this is called the Callaway pattern, and it has these striations in the body that helps to evenly, of course, cook whatever you're cooking. When you're cooking, and I am not a chef, so when you're cooking something this deep and this big, you want to have an even, right? You want to have even temperature and even heat throughout the whole piece. But that's a nice piece. That should be a piece worth in the 60s, $60 or so. I'm going to have to move some stuff, so bear with me. The mark is here. Might be a little bit difficult to see, but really a nice piece and in good condition. Now, I would always support the bottom of the piece like this, so with two hands, just so you don't break it and so it doesn't crack while it's in your hand and rip open your finger, which I will show you. I did that once. This one is from the 1980s, and this one is, where's the price? $27.75. Do you see that? $27.75 for the Callaway pattern. This piece is worth 60 bucks. And the reason it's worth 60 bucks, not only the matching lid, but also a relatively rare pattern. You don't see it very often. So this is a real bargain on the road. If you move down, you can see that in the 80s, they also introduced, the 80s and 90s, they also introduced Visions. Visions was a big deal for CorningWare, and that's more amber. That's not that same brown. You can see, let me just show you the difference between brown and amber. See how this is brown? See how that has more of an orange to it? And basically there's a difference between the two. Visions was so you can watch your cooking, you can watch what's happening when you are when you're actually cooking this. So if you're cooking a sauce, for example, you can watch and make sure that it doesn't boil over. I burn everything. I'm a crappy, lousy cook. These typically are not in good condition ever. I don't care where you see them. They're rarely in good condition, and the reason for it is because they've sat on the stove top. They've taken a lot of heat. There's your mark. They have the interior body spout, and the mark is clear. And they're introduced in the late 20th century. Good chefs, I guess, like them, but the Vision cookware, I would say if you're going to do this, give me a clear piece. That's what I would think, but again, I'm not a chef. I would think give me a clear piece so I can see it. This one, they want $24.75 for that, sky high. These should be $15 for the small and $20 for the large. So that's what we're seeing there. I think this is the best pattern that they got after the cornflower blue. That's a 1980s pattern. And of course, what ends up happening in the antique world, which really shouldn't happen, if it's not so old, it's not usually higher value. That's really a problem because there are things of great quality and great design. Just because they're a little bit younger, they end up being less lower priced. So you want to think about that when you're thinking about collecting, because eventually these are going to be pretty darn old. So this is the 3-liter with lid, very pretty, and it goes back to that tradition of primary colors for CorningWare. So that tradition of having the primary colors, which we saw in the 1960s, 20 years later in the 1980s, you're starting to see the same thing. Look at the size of these. I mean, look at the size of that. This piece is enormous. This is huge. This is, you know, Thanksgiving kind of amounts. So this is the 5-liter with the lid in really nice condition. Here's the mark. You can see it underneath the handles. And then the other thing that I like about this is you can see that the decoration has not been, in fact, marred or skewed or damaged in any way. Now, for that big one, that piece from the 1980s, they want $52.50 for it. And I will tell you that is a bargain because that's a $78, $79, 5-liter huge piece. Now, what you're going to find interesting is this. This is much more everyday. So a lot of people prefer to have this size. It's still big. It's not Thanksgiving family, everybody's coming to dinner big, but it's big. This one is $25.50. This is a real bargain because this piece is easily worth $40. That's a beautiful one too. But from the 80s, you have to like the design and you have to realize that you might have to wait a couple more years to see this become a revival piece that everybody wants. Another rare pattern is the Green Medallion, really showing you some rare patterns here. We're lucky to be able to see them. And the Green Medallion piece is another one that dates to the latter part of the 20th century. What you're seeing is sort of this, not only the traditional kind of forms of the 80s and some flowers, but you're starting to see what are symbols that become popular in the 80s and that continue for about another 20 years. So these symbols or designs or iconic elements, you see a lot of that happening in that time period as we enter into the 90s. And then the 90s come and they start to do this French white stuff, which is, forget the patterns, we're just going plain. And that's interesting too. So this should be pretty high because this is pretty rare. And this one they want $27.50. Without a lid, it's probably worth 30 bucks. So this is a couple dollars under. I have to say, I think this dealer has very, very reasonable prices for these. So there's some very nice and rather rare Corningware options here. I'm not a germaphobe. I wear the gloves because the oils on our hands can be transferred to objects, attract dirt, deteriorate the objects, and devalue them. I don't own these objects, so I protect the objects wearing the gloves. I left the Corningware for you. There's more to come from Orlando, Florida.